If my wife secretly had an abortion of our child to continue her affair with another man, aside from compensation for the infidelity, how much more could I potentially claim if we were to divorce? I believe there's a difference in the amount depending on whether or not I hire an attorney. To be honest, I'm torn about getting an attorney. It's hard to suppress my urge to take actions outside of the legal framework. I want to ruin both my wife's family and the man she's seeing. I learned about my wife's abortion from a female friend of hers, which apparently took place in public. This friend has given a statement. I'm a 29-year-old office worker and my wife is 31, currently a stay-at-home wife. We've been married for 4 years and don't have any children. The other man is 31 and an office worker, and apparently they were high school classmates. Since the beginning of this year, she started avoiding intimacy, citing health reasons. It's been nearly celibate ever since. In mid-June, a relative of my wife passed away suddenly. She went to the funeral with my in-laws. During this, she accidentally left her cell phone at home. The next morning, I noticed multiple texts from a man's name. Out of curiosity, I ended up reading them. The texts were about inviting her for a date that included a hotel stay. Then my feelings for her instantly cooled off, and I went on to read past messages. That in July I had installed surveillance cameras in the living room and bedroom, and confirmed she brought someone home. It seemed by last Monday, which was not long ago, I thought I gathered enough evidence when an older gentleman came to my workplace. He introduced himself as the father of a friend of my wife, named Friend A. We decided to talk in a different location. There he informed me about my wife's affair and her abortion. He said we could discuss in detail at his house, so I went over after work. I lied to my wife, saying I was going for drinks with a client. Upon arriving, I was greeted by my wife's friend, A, and another female friend, B. In addition to A and B, there were around 4 other people, all of whom bowed deeply in apology. Except were friend of Page's parents, A's sister, friend B, and B's parents. From them, I learned about the timeline of my wife's affair and the abortion, and I was left in shock. After receiving their apologies, A and B made some outrageous remarks, and I couldn't help but slap both of them. I'm still gathering evidence, so I told them to avoid contact with my wife and left in a hurry. I learned that from the beginning of the affair, A and B had been encouraging my wife's infidelity. Actions. Also, they seem to have mocked my obliviousness during the time of the abortion. However, after witnessing their own relatives happily celebrating childbirth, they realized the gravity of their actions and became afraid. After hearing from A and B, my resentment towards my wife grew. I was torn between squeezing her for a large alimony or taking her to court to shatter her reputation. I hadn't recorded the conversation at the friend's house, and there were no written records. But I know the date and name of the clinic where the abortion took place. I also know they collected money for the abortion procedure, and that 4 other women were involved. I don't think they'll turn on me. After all, A and B even had their parents apologize to me. I've slapped them once, but they provided information, so I'll spare them any further retribution. It seems my wife started seeing the guy in mid-December and began the affair. And by the start of January, she had an abortion at 10 to 11 weeks pregnant. That must have been the reason she was feeling unwell. At the end of January, she continued the affair. Around mid-March, during my one-week business trip, my wife and her lover went on a trip. She told me she was staying at a friend's because she was lonely. And from then on, their affair continued smoothly. I discovered the affair around mid-June. I learned various things from A and B just last Monday. Piecing together A and B's story with the emails gives a rough timeline. Yesterday morning, I called a private investigator agency and asked them to recommend a lawyer. I received a call from the private investigator during lunch, was given a lawyer's contact, and arranged to meet them in the afternoon. But to avoid spilling the beans, I decided to sleep in, grabbed some breakfast, made up an excuse about being late, and left the house. In the evenings, I've been staying late at work or taking work home, claiming it's the pre-August holiday rush to avoid any contact with her. We hardly speak for even 10 minutes a day. I check my wife's phone and computer emails late at night and have confirmed she hasn't been in touch with A or B. Though I'm upset at what they told me, I've already slapped them, so I guess there's no need for more punishment, as long as I don't do anything that puts me at a disadvantage. The other man is married and apparently has 2 sons, aged 6 and 3. He earns roughly $42,000 a year. By the way, I earn around $31,000. I've got a handle on the professions of his parents, sister, and brother. He's had the day off yesterday, so I was able to get a lot done. Hired an attorney as well. At first, I thought it was just for consultation, but after talking and getting a feel for the lawyer's demeanor, I thought, this is the one. Just 15 minutes into our chat, I told him I wanted him on the case. With a laugh, he asked, "Are you sure you want me?" I told him I trusted him entirely. And he got right to work. Had a deal on the retainer and fees, because he came recommended. So at the lawyer's suggestion, we decided to invite A and A's parents and B's parents to the attorney's office. The meeting's at 6 p.m. today. I tend to apologize for the altercation and ask for their cooperation in holding my wife and her lover accountable. My wife left early yesterday morning for a funeral at her family home and didn't return until almost 11 p.m. She's got a small reunion this evening, but it seems like it's just a meetup between her and her lover. She told me there'd be about 10 people. I know they plan on dinner, drinks, and a hotel stay. Actually, considering it, I'll have a private investigator tailing them, planning to confront them once they enter the hotel. Expectations, though the lawyer has cautioned me against going overboard. I might just play deaf on that one. After discussions with the attorney, the plan is to push for a hefty settlement and damages and put financial pressure on them. I intend to make sure both families feel the repercussions. No escaping responsibility. His parents of A and B came to the attorney's office for a discussion. Everyone looked pale as ghosts when they were called under the attorney's name. We started our conversation after getting their consent to record both audio and video. First, I apologized to everyone for the abrupt summons. I then apologized to A and B for letting my emotions get the better of me and physically lashing out. I also informed them that I would take legal responsibility for my actions. Then, on the attorney's request, I had A and B repeat what they told me before. I asked for their testimonies regarding any interactions and behaviors of those involved. A and B both assured that they would testify and take responsibility for their actions. All these points were consolidated by the attorney with an agreement for their cooperation. This was documented in writing. Interestingly, at that time, A and B expressed a desire to use their own bodies as an apology. The attorney gave them a piece of his mind on that. The risks of being accused of setting a trap, the fact that I'm still married and it would be considered infidelity, thus putting me at a disadvantage, were explained. The whole idea was quite a shock to me. To put it briefly, A and B mentioned they had deprived me of intimacy for about 7.5 months. Actually, if I had resorted to using services of that nature, I'd face monetary costs and risks like stees or troubles from shady establishments. Their idea was to offer themselves to alleviate my frustrations without any unnecessary risk. If I had already spent money on such services, they intended to reimburse me. They even offered to cover costs for any health tests if that was a concern. Why they came to this conclusion is still beyond my comprehension. Later on, the discussion shifted to summoning the other woman. But surprisingly, both the attorney and the AD decided to accompany. First, we called his house, explained the situation to his wife, and she sounded tearful. We asked her to come to the attorney's office. At this time, the lawyer reiterated to her not to contact her husband. She arrived accompanied by her father. Asked the lawyer to explain about our current situation along with the evidence. Meeting before, however, it seems they confronted him without gathering any evidence and let things slide. After this, we'll head to the scene to secure evidence and then move to a location where the private investigator specified before with a group of us. It's about 10:50 p.m. I say the private investigator told me that my wife and the other man entered the hotel around 25 minutes ago. Actually, I was supposed to send a message, but instead, the other man's father-in-law called him. Your wife has collapsed. But come home immediately. The lawyer contacted my in-laws and the other man's parents. Of course, we emphasized not to contact my wife or the other man. About 20 minutes later, my wife and the other man came out. They looked shocked and frozen when they saw our group. The other man's father-in-law lunged at him and started throwing punches. But the lawyer and private investigators separated them. There was another person from the private investigator agency, and he was calmly filming everything. For some reason, I was held back by two, A and B, and couldn't move. It seems someone reported us, and the police arrived. A lawyer handled it and drove them away for us. After a while, my in-laws and the other man's parents arrived. The lawyer explained everything and conveyed our intentions to divorce and seek compensation. So from now on, the lawyer emphasized that my wife and the other man should never contact me or the other man's wife. Finally, everyone dispersed. I went home and my wife, the other man, and his wife all went to their respective parents' houses. We decided to have a meeting at the lawyer's office the following Monday at 7:30 p.m. I went to my parents' place and told them everything. They told me to do what I think is right, so I'll try my best without getting them involved. Even though I feel like I've lost since she cheated, it seems my crappy wife and the other man were serious. Thanks to those who knew about the affair, it was just a fling, but they were secretly planning to get a divorce to their advantage. Apparently, they thought of A and B as traitors since they ruined their plans. They even submitted the divorce papers. From now on, it'll be just discussions about compensation. My wife must be feeling bad because the other man and his wife are now reconciling. The progression of our discussions was left up to the lawyer. The lawyer had told me to stay silent and endure today's proceedings. The cause for her infidelity seems to have been a reunion last October at the second party, where there was a lot of alcohol, and it seemed like a show of complaints about the current life. My wife and the other man, while discussing their domestic frustrations, somehow connected. Just on the way back, they exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. A few days later, the other man invited her out for a meal as a thank you for listening to his complaints. After repeating this a few times, they both felt like starting their lives over together. She told AB and the other four that my attitude was cold and that she got angry over trivial things, and she consulted them about family matters. But after they were told a few times that the other guy was really sweet, they just got all excited on their own and said they gladly helped out, you know? She claimed having an abortion was a punishment for me not valuing her enough. She felt fortunate that her relationship with me had deteriorated to the point where she had to consult the other man, and that she now had someone to back her up on that front. As for A and B, she just thought they were a bit off recently. However, there was an incident at a hotel recently. It seems they finally realized they were at a disadvantage because their affair had been exposed to their families. So far, these are the actions of my wife and the other man against me. But regarding the actions of the other man's wife, you'd laugh. She apparently couldn't do much. Even after seeking both free and paid legal advice about divorce, when it comes to the lack of intimacy at night, I'd be grateful if they'd be responsive even just once a week during the demanded child-rearing phase. Looks at you, Alicia. As for mistakes in housework and child-rearing, it's just nitpicking. That's all. Isn't she a wonderful wife getting along with her husband's parents and siblings? That seems to be the case. It was difficult to prove the other woman's fault, so they just kept discussing how to break them up. But when I got evidence of their affair, A and B felt guilty and sided with me, which ruined their plans. It took me almost 3 hours to get all of this out. I'm grateful for the lawyer's patience in asking questions and for the verbal abuse and physical retaliation I received from my in-laws and the lover's parents. By the way, I felt invisible during all of this. The other woman kept crying the whole time. A and B cried when they realized they'd been used. But the real bombshell came from the lover's father. From now on, they need to act sincerely. It's pointless to mention the child they already aborted. Act will force the lover and his wife to mend their relationship, but we have our own lives too. Fictions. I asked if they could settle the matter for about $70,000, which includes compensation for the affair and the loss of the child. Just as I was about to stand up and start yelling, B pulled my right arm, causing me to fall over. It seems A and B had been asked by the lawyer to hold me back if I tried to lash out. Apparently, the lawyer even instructed them to restrain me last Saturday. They said it would be detrimental if I lost my temper. The lawyer then proposed an amount of $176,000, which was about 1.3 times our original agreement, in front of the lover's father. This is the total claim for both of you. How you split it is up to you. Think hard about why you're being charged this much. The discussion the next day ended midway. The other man's wife was absent due to poor health. I also started getting a headache partway through and couldn't participate anymore. Right from the beginning of the discussion, there was a barrage of requests to settle and to reduce the amount, with barely any pleasantries exchanged. The other man's family has a mortgage on their house, and his father is retired. He's planning to start a new job next April, but if this gets out, he might not be able to. Moreover, the lover's brother is a teacher, and this could affect his career. The other man's children are being bullied at elementary school and daycare. Please don't crush the opportunity for his wife to reflect and start her life over. I responded, "That's not my problem. Handle it yourselves." Anyway, the meeting ended due to my health condition. The drama continues. The situation is getting even more out of control. The lawyer advised handling things calmly. I, on the other hand, want to ruin the lives of my wife and her lover. At that next meeting also ended abruptly, with 5 minutes to go, and the lover and his parents hadn't shown up. When the lawyer made a call using the speaker function, the other man's father answered, "Sorry, but my son isn't feeling well." The lawyer responded, then he should go to the hospital, get checked out, and bring back a doctor's note. But the other man's father was silent for a moment. Afterwards, he said, "Actually, my son has already been drinking and is drunk." About 15 minutes later, the other man showed up, clearly intoxicated. Simply, he had been out of sorts since getting home from work and turned to alcohol right away. Even when his mother tried to intervene, he wouldn't listen. But the lawyer declared, "We can't have a discussion in this state." But the other man, perhaps emboldened by the alcohol, dropped a bombshell. "The compensation is too high." "Do you think I can afford that? Are you desperate or something? I'll lend you my wife. Let's call it even with the compensation." I and the lawyer were stunned. The other man's wife was crying. The other man's wife's father was furious. His parents looked pale and shocked. My wife and in-laws were just stunned. But the lawyer and some office staff had to restrain the other man's wife's raging father and take him to a separate room. Afterward, the other man was practically dragged out by his parents. My wife's situation has definitely been exposed to those around us. It seems that someone might have seen what happened at the hotel on Saturday. She's being cornered, with some friends even declaring they want to cut ties with her. She's been calling friends AK traitors and accusing them of selling her out to save their own skins. Just from the looks of it, 3 out of the remaining 4 friends have told my wife not to drag them into this. It's all their own doing, even though they got involved on their own initiative. I'm being cautious since it's unclear who witnessed the event and who's spreading the news. My in-laws seem to want to help, but they're probably not sure what to do. But seems they want to resolve this soon and have offered a sum greater than what we'd expected. We've put it on hold anyway, especially since after the other man's comments, his wife has shifted from considering reconciliation to divorce. He still doesn't know about this. After sending my wife and in-laws home, I had a meeting with the lawyer. I'll be meeting with the A and B tomorrow morning. Apparently, they've been receiving a lot of messages as well. News is spreading in places I don't know about, which is unsettling. This recent meeting hardly made any progress. It seems my in-laws have been crying out to my parents. My mother was saying to take what's given and quickly cut ties with them. As over the phone, she felt that their attitude lacked remorse and sincerity. I just want to cut ties as soon as possible. At the next meeting, my parents also participated. And B apologized profusely to them. Dad and Mom both said they've reflected enough, haven't they? It's fine now. But they also emphasized never let this happen again while accepting the apology. According to Mom, you can tell just by looking into their eyes. They've apologized sincerely, haven't they? It seems a bit cruel to keep harping on about it, doesn't it? After their conversation, for some reason, Mom decided to take A and B out for lunch. When she came back, she said they were great girls. The next day, Sunday, the other woman's father mentioned he had something to discuss, so we met up in the afternoon. The other woman was with him. They wanted me to introduce them to a lawyer on her behalf and use the evidence I had, promising payment in return. I agreed to call the attorney on Monday. Apparently, the other man was drinking heavily because he was outed at his job. For now, he's apparently passing it off as a private matter outside of work, but I do have evidence. Retaliatory fistulas, visiting a hotel during work hours. Also, the other woman was a mess. The next day, I called a lawyer first thing in the morning to get a recommendation for a lawyer for the other woman. Then I explained the other woman's situation from the day before. The lawyer suggested she visit a psychiatrist, so I decided to have her go based on their recommendation. I then explained the situation to my coworkers. I tried to keep the mood light when telling my supervisor and colleagues, but it ended up creeping them out. I thought I was being considerate, but currently, despite warnings from my attorney, I'm getting calls from both our in-laws and the other man's parents. I'm ignoring all of them. My lawyer seems to be under some pressure too. They're apparently pushing for a quick settlement. It looks like they are pretty desperate. At last it's all settled. My wife owes me $14,000 for infidelity and $42,000 for the miscarriage. The other man owes me $28,000 for infidelity, $42,000 for the miscarriage, and $14,000 for assault, totaling $84,000. Officially, the other man resigned on his own, but he was essentially fired. The other woman's attorney seems to have made some moves. They spread word about his offering to settle the compensation and that she had to see a psychiatrist. mixes with the evidence I provided about their hotel visits during work hours, it's no wonder he was fired. They promised to pay in full by the end of this year. I'll let my lawyer discuss the timeline. I'm not sure how they'll raise the money. By the way, there seems to be a bloody conflict between the brothers and the other man's family. It seems that there is a future inheritance dispute despite the fact that the other man's parents are still alive. I couldn't help but think, serves him right. My ex-wife seems to be mentally unstable and she's picking fights everywhere. She's constantly complaining to her friends and getting upset when they don't side with her, leading to repeated fallouts. She blames me for losing her friends. She claimed she settled for me when we started dating and got married. The reason she started dating was because she had a crush on a female friend who helped me. She decided to marry me considering her age and the future ahead. She had an affair because I apparently stopped making an effort to keep her love. She told me all this at the lawyer's office. At the time, I just thought she was being unreasonable, but it hit me hard when I got home. Almost 2 years of dating and 4 years of marriage. 8 years of marriage, all for nothing. My ex-wife will also pay her dues in a lump sum. The couple who introduced me to my ex-wife came over and tearfully apologized, saying, "We're so sorry for introducing you to such a bad match." If they had known what kind of person my ex-wife was, they wouldn't have introduced her to me, and they just kept crying. I heard from the husband of the couple that my ex-wife had called his wife and ranted, saying something like, "It's your fault for setting me up with such a boring guy, and now I'm miserable." Anyway, that's where things wrap up for me. As for the other woman, it seems she's not in a position to have any discussions right now, so a lawyer is acting on her behalf. I'm planning to go to a morgue service for a miscarried child next week. I have a feeling everything will end without a proper apology, but at this point, I don't even want anything to do with any of these people. So that's fine with me. What were they thinking, causing mental distress to the other woman and burdening both families with financial strains? Given that these two show no signs of remorse, they might just end up causing trouble for others again someday. I wonder if they'll regret it when that day comes. Anyhow, for me, I want to focus on healing my emotional wounds. B&B have been considerate and kept in touch, so maybe I'll meet up with them sometime. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end.